Juan Manuel Marquez was one of the boldest and most fearsome fighters to ever lace up gloves. Over his 21 years in professional boxing, Marquez took belts in 4 weight divisions and challenged and defeated some of the best fighters of his era. Growing up in a poor neighborhood full of gang violence, Marquez decided to put his energy into boxing, racking up an amateur record of 82 wins to 4 losses, with 72 wins coming by way of knockout. During his professional career, Marquez's greatest rival was none other than Manny Pacquiao, who Marquez fought 4 times and then knocked out cold in their last and final encounter. And don't worry, I'll be covering all of those fights soon. So, what made Marquez such an incredible fighter? And exactly what tactics did he use to come out on top while going toe-to-toe with absolute monsters? Marquez is the ultimate embodiment of the Mexican attitude towards boxing, an entertaining juxtaposition of refined nuance and unrestrained aggressive mayhem. While this kind of attitude almost requires a rock-solid chin, and Marquez's chin may as well have been injected with adamantium, he was not simply betting that he was tougher. No, he was betting that when push came to shove, he was better. He was right. And here's why. To win these intense, lengthy exchanges, Marquez employed crafty head movement and unusual punching angles, finding obscure, downright brilliant routes to his targets. While most aggressive fighters try to just bombard their competitors until they blast their way through, Marquez was like that general who leads his army through a hidden mountain pass to come up behind them. His head movement was a thing of beauty because it perfectly set up the angles for his punches. Here Marquez slips his southpaw opponent's jab from a narrow posture, very hard to pull off. Here he does the same to an orthodox fighter who's shifted to southpaw, scoring a knockdown. Marquez would also lean far forward from a pretty narrow sideways stance, setting up overhands that traveled in unusual arcs, more than capable of splitting an opponent's guard. Overhands aren't really known for being tight, precision punches, but Marquez's upper body movement got the job done. And the crazy thing is that these are specific examples going one punch at a time. Marquez loved to draw competitors into long exchanges where he moved from one of these tactics to another, to another, to another, until eventually he got the result he was looking for. At the end of the day, Marquez was an opportunist, and while he was busy setting up the angles for his punches with his own head movement, he was also tracking his opponent's head movement. The idea behind this is simple enough. If an opponent crouched, Marquez threw an uppercut. If they slipped, he threw a hook. And if they pulled or moved back, he switched to long-range punches, even shuffling or shifting forward to close the distance. Extrapolating on this, one punch could encourage a competitor to move directly into the next. And the way that Marquez mixed really wide, looping punches with incredibly short, tight punches really opened up a whole lot of opportunities. Marquez had incredible power in his shorter punches because of how he moved and structured his body while throwing shots. He kept his feet under him and kept his body aligned. Because of this, he could parry his opponent's punch, and then use that same hand to land a hard punch of his own. keeping great power even though his arm was already halfway extended. But like any expert opportunist, Marquez did his best to stir things up in order to create those opportunities. Because opportunity mostly comes with change, and very rarely from following the status quo. Through aggressive footwork, Marquez overwhelmed his opponents and took them far out of their comfort zone. The backbone of Marquez's footwork was 3 common tactics combined in a specific sequence and executed brilliantly. The first piece of the puzzle was the tried and true pendulum step. Used extensively by all top pound-for-pound fighters today, the pendulum step involves bouncing the lead foot as far back as the rear foot and then bouncing it back, playing with rhythm all the while. See here how Marquez breaks his rhythm by pausing slightly, then launches into his attack. And he actually pulled off the same exact tactic to land another knockdown immediately afterwards. The next piece was a split step, where Marquez jumped into a wider stance to gain distance and power. And the last was a simple pivot. Marquez's most common sequence was to pivot into a pendulum step, periodically transitioning into a split step to launch himself forward. His weapon of choice here was either a body hook, head hook, or uppercut. All starting from the same position, which would help to disguise which attack was coming. Because his pendulum step conditioned Marquez's opponents to seeing his lead foot advance and retreat in rhythm, he could smoothly advance forward into a split step and take them unawares. Or he could suddenly pause his retreat to stop short and counter. It was these footwork tactics that forced his competitors to exchange, because if they didn't, they would simply get picked apart from long range and then bullied into submission. Marquez's uppercuts really stand out in particular, and prove just how underutilized the punch is as both a long-range and short-range weapon. While many consider uppercuts to be a purely defensive or purely close-range tool, Marquez's beautiful combinations, paired with aggressive footwork, made them a punch to be reckoned with. Some might call Marquez's style brave, some might call it reckless, but there was no denying it was a sight to behold. He's well worth studying if you train, and his fights are well worth watching just for fun if you don't. Make sure to check out my books on footwork, defense, and power, all linked below. From The Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.